According to the India-based Mega Updates portal, one of the world's largest online informative platforms in terms of views, BRICS countries have officially surpassed the G7 in terms of proportion of global PPP GDP, and this trend is projected to continue. The current BRICS currently accounts for 31.5% of global GDP, while the G7 contributes 30%. The BRICS are predicted to contribute more than 50% of global GDP by 2030, and the proposed enlargement would almost probably accelerate this. When comparing economies in purchasing power parity terms, China's GDP actually surpassed that of the United States in 2015. This will usher in huge global changes, as Chinese President Xi Jinping said in his farewell remarks to Russian President Vladimir Putin as he returned to Beijing following their summit last week. The primary issue is that the BRICS grouping, including possible new members, is very much in the orbit of China and Russia, with the G7, including the EU and the US, losing tractional power among them. Western influence also seems to be fading as the BRICS alliance continues to grow and attract membership pleas from around the globe. Recently, we learned that over 24 nations are showing interest in BRICS, and the numbers seem to be growing. We also know that Bangladesh, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates have all just joined the BRICS New Development Bank, with many more nations on the way. It would seem that the G7's consistent failures on several fronts is costing the West a key strategic position of global dominance as the BRICS Plus alliance continues to garner support and solidarity all over the globe. So is BRICS finally taking over global economic leadership from the G7 alliance? The G7, which includes the EU and the US, appears to be losing traction in the world, and this is due to a variety of factors, including an overall mistrust of US foreign policy, a desire to ring-fence against sanctions by forming an alternative trade bloc to the G7, what is perceived as EU greed in global markets, and long-held animosity against various European legacies from colonial times. It is also expected to usher in the long-debated transition from a unilateral global basis led by the US to a multipolar one led by the main BRICS economies. The G7's recent announcement of an alternative to China's Belt and Road Initiative smells of power politics rather than a genuine desire to assist the developing world. The West appears to engage only in moral posturing. If the debauchery in Iraq and Afghanistan are any indication, it holds no officials accountable and frequently destroys invaded countries. While one would expect some humility from those defeats, the virtue signaling surrounding the Ukraine-Russia conflict, as well as desperate attempts to persuade and at times force nations to choose a side, demonstrate that they are back to their old ways. The West is working hard, but with little success, to change the narrative surrounding the Ukraine-Russia conflict to one of imperialism. Former colonies have not agreed with that assessment. Surprisingly, former colonizers are quick to refer to it as such. Commentators in the Western world are dismissing the struggles of former colonies through this lens. All of this is happening as the BRICS nations come to the aid of poor nations. The agenda for the BRICS meeting is an example. Former colonies and developing economies around the world do not want to compete for moral high ground. They see the Ukraine-Russia conflict as a bilateral conflict. More than who was right and who was wrong in the European conflict, the economic fallout was a major concern for them. Rising oil and gas prices, double-digit inflation, and a global economy on the verge of recession keep leaders awake at night more than a European conflict. Nonetheless, it was Indonesian President Joko Widodo who initiated Ukraine-Russia peace talks by inviting Vladimir Putin to the G20. Western leaders, on the other hand, have been using the conflict to break Russia. The West's intentions appear to revolve around containing rather than including the developing world. Unless and until the G7 includes permanent members from the global south, it will look exactly like it did 100 years ago, when these same countries were colonizers. On the other hand, we see the BRICS expansion strategy and how global power conflict is fueling the BRICS expansion push. In the midst of China-US tensions, the desire to build a larger BRICS has grown stronger than ever. Soon after Chinese President Xi Jinping emphasized the importance of speeding up the BRICS expansion process at the 14th BRICS leaders meeting in late June in Beijing, Iran and Argentina announced that they had submitted formal applications to the BRICS. Meanwhile, Kazakhstan, Saudi Arabia, Argentina, Egypt, Indonesia, Nigeria, Senegal, the United Arab Emirates, Thailand, and other guest countries attended the first BRICS foreign ministers meeting in May. All of these positive actions are clear indications that the BRICS expansion is accelerating. The main reasons for BRICS expansion can be attributed to three factors. First, the intense East-West conflict. Second, the deepening of BRICS Plus cooperation. And third, demands from node countries. The confrontation between the East and the West has become increasingly prominent in the new context of the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine and the intensifying Sino-US competition. As a result, both sides want to expand their network of friends and partners, thereby consolidating their camps. As emerging economies and regional great powers, the BRICS countries have a strong incentive to bring other node countries with key strategic locations and thriving economies into the fold. The more heated the East-West conflict, the greater the impetus for BRICS expansion. The meeting of foreign ministers was the main attraction at the start of BRICS, after which a declaration was issued. Despite the fact that BRICS was later upgraded to a leaders' summit, the practice of issuing declarations following the meeting has continued. It wasn't until 2017, when China successfully hosted the BRICS summit in Tiananmen and proposed a BRICS Plus cooperation mechanism, that the connotation of BRICS as something that could extend beyond its 5 members became more enriched and clear. China's donation of reserve funds to the BRICS New Development Bank was another notable event. Following that, BRICS Plus cooperation gradually expanded to include economic and trade exchanges, political security, and people-to-people and cultural exchanges. Following the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, the BRICS countries established a Vaccine Research and Development Center on March 22, 2022, putting the BRICS Plus cooperation on a solid footing. However, the continued expansion of BRICS Plus cooperation is inextricably linked to the support of regional states, particularly node countries with significant influence and strategic positions in the region. Without the active participation of these node countries, BRICS Plus cooperation will be deprived of a vast hinterland, making it difficult to sustain or grow. As a result, many of the guest countries mentioned above, such as Argentina and Indonesia, are node countries with clear national strengths and obvious location advantages. Being able to ride the rapid development of BRICS with the help of BRICS Plus cooperation is simply a good deal with great profits for these countries. As a result, these countries are eager to join the BRICS alliance.